Welcome to week number 4 of BurnerCast. We are back. I'm Joey Strutz. Got my co-hosts Brad Hosmer, McKenna Seacrest here again this week.
Good to be back.
So glad to be here I guess we're filming on a Friday, airing on a Wednesday. Hey, we got warm weather coming to Wisconsin, folks, man. We're going to be flying before we know it. We'll be doing tasks, events, maybe. We got hope, people. We got hope.
Yeah, it is really good to see the warm weather finally coming back. It's just starting to get somewhat flyable out over in the Midwest. I'm sure over on the West Coast as well, McKenna. You guys starting to get there?
Here.
Good.
Yeah, I'm going to be flying in Winthrop in a couple weekends, and I'm so excited.
Absolutely. All right, well, we got a really, really special guest for you guys tonight. He is a 3-time U.S. national champion, has competed overseas at the world title for Team USA on multiple occasions, and is now been announced as the 2021 U.S. National Championships Director. Please welcome to the podcast, Paul Petrehn. There we go. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Hi there. You guys are doing great. Congratulations on everything so far. It's been fun to watch.
Thank you very much. Really good to hear you guys.
Thank you.
So to start us off tonight, normally the first thing we do on the show is just go into like our guest's background in ballooning. So we knew you grew up in a ballooning family. Can you tell us a little bit just about, growing up in such a large family where so many people were involved in hot air ballooning?
Yeah. Again, my name is Paul Petrehn. For everyone that I haven't had a chance to meet that's watching, I'm the youngest of 11. There's 9 boys and 2 girls in my family, and there's us out of the 11, 6 of us are balloon pilots. My dad got into the sport when I don't even think I was around quite yet. He had taken a balloon ride with a friend of his out of Topeka, Kansas. They did a splash and dash to the edge of the bolster, and I think he bought a balloon like the next day and worked on getting his license after that. He was pretty hooked. And then growing up, my older brothers and sisters were getting involved, and once I got old enough, that's something that I wanted to do. It was kind of the pull in the family to go ballooning. My dad was doing some pretty cool stuff when I was a little kid. He was doing record attempts and did hot air balloon record attempts mostly for distance and duration. And he did a couple of pretty decent flights in an AX6 and an AX7. The AX7 balloon record flight, he flew for over 24 hours in a standard Balloon Works 7 77,000 cubic foot envelope.
Wow, that's awesome.
At the time when he did that flight, it broke records for AX7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 for quite a while. So he was doing some pretty crazy things when I was a kid growing up. And kind of to some degree, I was maybe a little embarrassed because none of my friends had a dad or had a parent that was doing something like that. So it wasn't till later on that I really appreciated some of the things he was doing as I was growing up, and look back and see how impressive some of those feats that he did were.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's something none of us 3 have really had the opportunity to feel. I know none of us grew up in ballooning families. It's just been kind of, work your way into it however you can. So I guess this question kind of stems off that was it like hard growing up with, so many of your siblings and then your parents all being involved in it, being pilots?
It was a little difficult. Obviously, there was a pull by some of my older ones in the family trying to take me ballooning when maybe I should have been home doing homework. So there might have been a little bit of that battle with the parents growing up. And it was just it wasn't nearly as popular for a young kid to be around something like that growing up. And I loved playing basketball. I played 4 years of of high school varsity basketball, and I went on and played a couple years on scholarship at a junior college. And so I had that just those things to kind of pull me as well. I was pretty decent in basketball, but I also loved ballooning. So I don't know that I gave either one the full attention that it needed, because I wanted to do both. And so growing up, there was the pull, the parents that wanted, make sure I was going to school and doing everything right there, and then trying to sneak away and hopping on my bicycle when I was real little to go out to where I could see balloons flying on those afternoon flights and things like that. But it was mostly fun, and it was a family sport, just like it is for many of you today. And it was a chance to bring out. Eventually, we got friends involved, and a lot of those friends are still involved with the sport today with many of us.
Absolutely.
So I have a question. So sorry, how old were you when you got your pilot certificate?
So I had my student license for quite a while. I probably had to. I think I had to renew my student pilot license because I had it for so long. I think I got my student license in '89. So I was about, I was 89. I started putting hours in the logbook. I didn't get my private license until I was 19. So in 93.
Okay.
And then I think I got my commercial rating in 95. So I was 21
Awesome.
basically when I got commercially rated. I was, doing a lot of basketball and doing that as much as I could. So that kind of delayed things. I know my brother John got his licensing as soon as he could, and so several of you guys have as well. But I was trying to be an athlete a little bit as best I could, and then once I finally realized
different
that
hobbies.
I wanted to. What's that?
Oh, just like juggling the two different hobbies.
Yeah. I was juggling the hobbies and juggling, things I like to do. And, but then there was opportunities, as I knew I wasn't going to go much further in basketball, and I saw what some opportunities present themselves with ballooning. I kind of jumped at those opportunities.
Yeah. So I assume what you're alluding to is those opportunities would be, so shortly after you got your corporate or your commercial license, you started working for Phil Glebe and flying for him, correct?
Well, before I started flying for him, I actually went on the road and was his crew chief in 1994 for a full season. His crew chief for a long time was Don Melvin. He kind of took a one year hiatus off of crewing. So I was on the road full time with the Pontiac balloon, driving the Chase Commander all across the country, meeting Phil at different events, and that was a great year, a great learning experience. He won the Battle Creek event that year, and he also won the U.S. National Championship that year as well. And it was a great experience to kind of really give me the push to go that competition direction that Johnny had gotten his feet wet and done really well early on in his competition career, and then crewing for Phil, seeing it from a different perspective, allowed me when I did it. I went back and did a little bit more school after '94, and then I pretty much started flying for him full time when I moved up to Michigan in '97. I was kind of crewing and flying a little bit at the same time, and then pretty much was waiting for my opportunity, and then I was one of his pilots flying all kinds of different balloons, and then also when we were back in Michigan, we were also doing flying rides for him here locally back in Michigan. So it was traveling with the corporate balloons and then coming back and flying rides with them when we weren't at an event and we were back at home. So he kept us busy. We were either on the road flying or we were back in Michigan flying.
See, I still vividly remember as a kid, I grew up near Battle Creek, and I remember you flying the Ben & Jerry's balloon. I think it was 01 or something. And that was just, to me, one of the coolest balloons I'd ever seen. And I just remember, actually, I think it was maybe in the Meyer parking lot. Trust me, I have the brain of an elephant. I remember everything. And I just remember getting the pinning card from whoever's driving that vehicle. And I still remember it to this day. Like that balloon was just so cool. That was some cool experiences. You flew what? Ben & Jerry's for him, some Pontiac, some. What else did you fly?
Boy, I flew the Jose Cuervo tequila bottle balloon, Ben and Jerry's, Pontiac, GMC, AC Delco. Locally, we had a WHMI radio station balloon. We had a balloon for Michigan, Michigan Consolidated Gas Company, lots of other banner balloons. But I was on the road for a couple of seasons. Well, initially I was on the road with the tequila bottle balloon, and then I was on the road with GMC for a little bit of time, and then AC Delco for a couple of years, and then Ben and Jerry's after that, flying both the special shape ice cream cone and the round balloon as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I think that was one of, honestly, like the first ballooning memories I had was, so many of the cool like Renaissance shapes and corporates flying over my house. Like even when I was really little, 3-4 years old,
That's so cool.
looking up and seeing a huge ice cream cone,
Yep.
100 feet from my house is just super, super surreal.
And that was
so
probably
cool.
me, probably before I had a chance to meet you.
Most likely, yes.
So can you talk about some of the unique experiences you had with those corporate flights? Where I seen on Facebook you posted a while back, you were flying out of racetracks, and I think back in the day, if Facebook existed back then, you'd have all these cool pictures, but of course it didn't exist, and you had so many memories for us. But can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, so Renaissance Balloons was Phil Gleeb's company, and he had the contract with the Winston cigarettes balloon, which obviously can't fly for obvious reasons nowadays, but that provided access to all of those NASCAR events in the early days, and then all of his General Motors balloons would kind of piggyback with the relationship and the association that he had with the major sponsor of the NASCAR at the time. And so we did a lot of with motorsports in general, with General Motors being a prime sponsor, and carrying that over to balloon sponsorships. We were doing midday flights at racetracks all over the place. Rockingham, North Carolina, Daytona, Richmond, flying out of the infield of the Richmond 400, the Pontiac Excitement 400, with the American flag hanging under the Pontiac balloon is one of the highlights of that time frame that I remember. Doing kind of some crazy things that maybe you don't have the opportunity to do, or maybe you've learned that it's not such a great idea to do nowadays. But you're doing those flights by yourself. There's no passengers on board. You're doing what you're comfortable with, but obviously you've got to have some of those flights would get your full attention. You'd get over, you flying in the middle of the day is not recommended, but it can be done. It can be done safely, and you just got to give yourself lots of options and lots of open areas. I didn't always make the right decision. One of the flights I did, if you really want to hear about maybe one of the ones I'd like to have back, was I was flying in Daytona, and I was heading towards the airport in Daytona. So the onshore breeze hadn't yet kicked on from the east to the west. It was still going west to east, but we had permission to land at the airport. And the airport, Daytona Airport, is just on the kind of the west or the east and south side of the track. And what do you know? When I took off, I got pushed. I got a push to the north and completely missing the airport, and I'm heading to the east. And I'm trying to put it down in as big of a spot as I can. But in the middle of the day, the left and the right are coming and going, and you're not really lining up on anything. And as I approached, literally, I approached the intercoastal waterway, still heading to the east. And what do you know? I'm coming towards what looked like an island, and it was kind of an island, and I landed right on the edge of it. But I look around, and there's a bridge right to the island, and there's a road that circles the island that I landed on. And my crew chief was unlocking the gate with the police officer. They let the chase commander right onto the road. We had to carry it a little bit, but that was one of those flights that had my full attention. It had my full attention, and I look up and I see the one of the blimps flying around, and I know Terry Dillard, who flies the airships. I know he's got some footage of that flight or that landing anyway somewhere. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure Terry Dillard has some of the only pictures of that that landing that probably ever exists. But I
Wow.
landed safely. It wasn't. I probably took off too soon because the wind hadn't had a chance to switch yet on the coastal wind, and I also didn't give myself enough opportunity to land at the airport if the winds did shift a little bit left or right, as they did. But that was kind of a unique experience. Like Joe Zavada said, he wanted to always land on an island. Well, I did land on an island, and I was pretty lucky how it turned out.
Oh my God.
All was well. We were able to fly that evening as well and hit another one of the races later on in the afternoon or later on in the evening before sunset.
Wow.
It was a pretty cool flight though.
That's crazy. I can imagine you had so many thermals during those flights and just high wind landings, but I'm sure it made you a better pilot in the end. I'm sure that's kind of what led you to your success that you have today.
It really made you focus, and all attention was on flying the balloon at all times.
Yeah. I feel like I've heard so many stories. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go.
I feel like I've heard so many stories.
Events. We also did drag racing events too. So we did NHRA drag races. We did NASCAR events. All kinds of different motorsports events we had the balloons at, and that was a great experience because those opportunities don't present themselves these days like they used to. Those balloons aren't. Really cool. Yeah, those balloons aren't sponsoring like they used to, and you have the restrictions with the airspace as well to contend with too.
Yeah, it's sad to see the lack of corporate balloons compared to what used to be when I was growing up. I mean, those Pontiac and GMC balloons, they have like the physical cars in it. I mean, those are so nice. Like I said, Ben & Jerry's one of my favorites. So on the same topic of corporate ballooning, you talked about flying a couple different shapes for Phil. What kind of was that like? Was there some interesting experiences with those where you're putting up and stuff where you're like, I don't know about this kind of things?
Well, got to fly them out in Albuquerque for the Balloon Fiesta, so that's always a fun place to fly balloons when there's a sea of people and limited landing spots. There was one time where I was flying the tequila bottle balloon, and I had a high wind landing, and I had a couple passengers on board, and my ground crew couldn't keep up with me at a full sprint when I was coming in and landing. And I was landing in what they call one of the gravel pits to the south when it used to be a gravel pit. Now it's fully developed. But there just happened to be a helicopter circling around because a balloon that landed prior to me had a high wind landing. And so the media was all there. And having a drag landing in a special shape looks far worse even than having a drag landing in a conventional balloon.
I'm sure.
Nobody was injured, but we collected a basket full of dust and dirt. And got us to a complete stop. And what do you know, when we landed, the balloon went down an incline. The basket was still on the same level that I had drug across, but when the balloon finally came to a stop, it went down like a 45-degree incline, the envelope did. And so so that was kind of interesting to see. Had we drug any further, we would have been going downhill for a little ways, but we came to a complete stop and had to get the dirt out of our teeth and everywhere else. It was interesting, but those balloons just require so much more crew and so much more time to set up and pack up. But we did some pretty cool flights with those balloons over the years, and tethering them in places that maybe you don't normally tether balloons, like downtown San Francisco with the Ben & Jerry's ice cream cone. Lots of unique places because the sponsors themselves are able to secure the permits to do those types of tethers. So we got to go to some unique locations and do some unique flights because of those sponsors and because of the events that they were hosting and putting on at the time. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun times following the Olympic torch with one of our balloons along the way, and tethering the balloon along the way at each of the torch stops that it made across the West Coast. That was a lot of fun. So we just got to be a part of something even bigger than ballooning, and accompany a lot of unique and very special events over the years.
Yeah, that's really cool that you got to experience those things.
Yep.
Like sometimes I wish I could go back in time and just like experience some of the older ballooning memories.
There's a lot of them out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So we know that you worked at Lindstrom Balloons and then at Cameron Balloons.
Yep.
So we were wondering about your experience working at those. Like, did you like it? And could you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, working for a balloon manufacturer is a great experience. While at Lindstrand, I was involved with a lot more of the production and inspection side of things, annual inspections, maintenance on basket and burners and tanks, pre-delivery of the new balloons and the test inflations of new balloons I was involved with. And then, so I was with Lindstrand Balloons from about 2003 to early 2004. And then I went to Cameron Balloons in 2004 as well, after being at Lindstrand. And I was involved more with the sales side of things, helping with all of the quotes and helping with the rendering process of design. And then I was also involved with all of the test inflations and such of all the new balloons, and had a hand in having a hand in marketing and some some ideas and things that we could put into production, and some new things, new technology, having a voice in some of those things as well. So I was very excited to have opportunities with both of those manufacturers, and I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. They getting in. I was with Cameron Balloons for almost 12 years, and that allowed me to also compete without having to really own a balloon, without having to take time off, PTO away from work. I was at a balloon event as part of the factory, and I got to do a lot of competitions because of that. And that's really when my competition career started taking off, being able to fly at lots of competitions in the course of the year, and help sell balloons while I'm at it. And that was a great experience and great opportunity for me. I wouldn't trade either one of those opportunities for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So to branch off that a little, actually, so I was wondering, so like when you're flying like a demo for, say, Cameron, or somebody else's balloon at an event, do you fly the same as you normally do, or are you a little bit more conservative going into it?
Yeah, I mean, I did switch balloons a lot. We had stock balloons that were always for sale. We never knew when a basket or a burner or a tank or an envelope was gonna be sold, so we always had to. I had to be versatile. I was always, for probably, if I had a balloon longer than or less than a year, that was a long time. It seemed like I was in a different balloon almost every year or every other year. And sometimes we did some situations with customers where we pre-built a balloon for them that I flew for maybe 50 to 100 hours, and then they were going to take possession of it. And of course, I'm trying to keep it clean and not put any not put any scorch marks on it. And but I think that also is indicative of the way I fly. I don't like to have a balloon that's got burnt out Nomex. And if I did nick something up on the balloon, at least I had the factory there to make it like new and get it in like new condition before it got sold off to the customer. But I think that made me a better pilot. There was no need to start a hot inflation too early, because it just, if you had to get it fixed, it just, you'd have to take the responsibility to go and maybe unstitch those panels so that the people at the factory who are in the sewing department could spend as little time working on a repair and get back to building the new stuff. So I think it made me a better pilot, and I always like to make sure that the balloon looked good after flying it for however long we flew it, looked like new for when they took it upon themselves. And they were basically just getting a very lightly used balloon at a reduced cost, of course. But I think that was something that was popular. Not everybody wanted could afford a brand new balloon, but a new kind of a new used balloon was something that worked out for several people. And I think that's kind of a process the manufacturers are still using today, with selling a kind of a new used balloon to a potential customer. They put a small deposit down, and then the final sale price is based on how many hours, total hours it has on it, that sort of thing. It also has the factory builds a balloon with a purpose, instead of having to double up the number of balloons they're potentially having to build and keep in stock. We're building a balloon with a purpose, knowing that it's got a dedicated home in a year or two. And it seemed to work well. It worked well for a lot of people. And I switched balloons a lot. I'm sure we're going to dive into some of my nationals discussions here, but I flew a different balloon. It felt like almost every other national championship I was at, but I think that made me a better pilot in the long run.
Yeah, that's actually what we were going to go into next. So just competition as a whole, but you have 3 national championships, including you were one of the first to do a back-to-back in what had seemed like a long time at that period. Can you talk to us just a little bit about like all 3 titles?
Yeah, the first one in 2004 was my first year at Cameron Balloons, and Andy Baird let me fly the Racer. That was like the first year that the Cameron ZL Racer came out. I don't know, honestly, I'm not sure I even had a chance to fly it before going into the nationals. But I had flown in racers before, but I hadn't really had much time in that particular balloon. And Andy wanted me to fly it that year. Everything clicked. We didn't get to fly a lot that year, but we did have 11 tasks. And I think I had like a 938 point average over 11 tasks, which is a really incredible average. And the scuttlebutt was we didn't get to fly enough, but I kind of just said, well, I didn't, to me, I flew every task very well that year. And I teamed up with Al Nels and Andy Baird. We flew together as a team that year, and everything just clicked. And Andy and I had an arrangement going into that championship that the next year in 2005, we'd switch balloons. So as fun as the first one was, and as gratifying as the first one was, winning again in the next year in 2005, I flew a conventional shape 70. So I think I was I'm the last pilot to win in a conventional shaped balloon. And there were racer pilots in 2nd through 9th or 10th place behind me, and we flew over 20 tasks that year. But they didn't have an advantage to me over me, because the task calling that year utilized a lot of pilot declared goals and a lot of fly-on tasks, where you're able to dictate your flight path and you're flying at a lower level to the ground, versus all tasks being all called by the director. And if the wind shifts, you might have to race up to a higher altitude to get up and get back down. There wasn't a lot of that in 2005, and I was able to win in a conventional shaped balloon, and had
That's awesome.
and had lots of tasks that year. And I think my brother John might have been in 2nd place behind me that year, but that was that particular year was really cool, because I won it in a 60 racer the first year, and then I switched to a conventional 70,000 cubic foot balloon the next year. And I think I proved to any doubters that I didn't stumble. I just didn't stumble into the first one, and I backed it up with a back-to-back performance the following year. And I was close to a three-peat in 2006. I was really close to the lead going in the last flight, and I think I slipped to 3rd place, but that was a lot of fun. And even in that year, I flew an entirely different balloon that 3rd year in Anderson, South Carolina. I flew a Cameron 56 racer. So in those 3 national championships back to back, I was in 3 different balloons and had top 3 performances. So that was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
I feel like that really shows your. I feel like that really shows your skill as a pilot, that you can do that.
Well, I didn't start off very well. So my first U.S. national championship was in Columbia, Missouri. and it was a debacle of a performance for me. I was about a 100-hour pilot or so, really wanting to fly at the Columbia, Missouri Nationals, close to Kansas City, where I was from. I didn't do very well. I got I've talked about this at safety seminars. Maybe one or more of you have heard of, but I hit a power line on one of the flights that I came in on a flying task, pulled into the field, and took off with everybody else, and I allowed myself to get distracted. You know, I was qualified. I was capable to fly the balloon, but something that it is not always talked about is all of the extra stresses and influences of getting in the air in a hurry. I inflated, got in the air, and I let myself get distracted with grabbing a radio in the bottom of the basket, or I had an Aurora 54 at the time. I always liked connecting those ropes on the throat to the basket, so in case I had to wind a baggie or a marker at the target. I allowed myself to do a couple of things after I had taken off that I don't do that anymore, and that particular flight completely changed my flying forever. I have a fairly extensive pre-flight routine in making sure everything is mounted in my basket up before I tip it over for inflation. That way, when I'm inflated, I don't have to mess with any of those things. And I'm not afraid to talk about that. It's it's something that it didn't need to happen. It did, but it forever changed my flying. That was in 1990. I want to say that was maybe in 96 or 7 when that happened. So that was my first U.S. national championship, and I finished in the 60s or the 70s that year. My very next national championship was when I was working for Lindstrand, and that was in 2003. And I went from my horrible finish in Columbia to a finish. I think it was just outside the top 10. I think I was 11th or 12th or something like that in Rantoul, Illinois. I'm sorry, let me backtrack. I skipped one. There was one in Rantoul, Illinois in '98. So I think I skipped a year or two from Columbia to Rantoul, and I made a jump. I was in the top 3 to 5 for most of the week, and I had a bad flight. And I finished outside the top 10. I think I finished 13th, but it was a great improvement from my first nationals. And then my next nationals after that, my third nationals was in 2003 in Anderson, South Carolina. And I made an even better improvement from there. I think I went from 13th to 11th. And then my fourth nationals, I was victorious in 2004, and my fifth nationals, I won back to back. And now I expect to be near the top 10, if not, anybody in the top 10 these days is good enough to win a national championship. They're just a couple of mistakes, a mistake away from probably being in the top 5. And then if you eliminate that one mistake, you're probably right there for a podium finish, if not the national championship finish. So what I've been able to do over the course of my national championship experiences is eliminate the scores below 500 points. And then when you eliminate those, you start realizing, all right, I'm not making those big mistakes, but what can I do now is when you need to be 1 meter or less, you can't be 5 meters. You can't be 3 meters. It's you getting your approaches lower to the ground so you can be more accurate with your marker drops on those tasks where you need to be, less than a couple of meters to get that optimum score. And those are kind of stages through my competition experiences that those are. I looked at the task sheets after my early nationals finishes, and I had just way too many task results that were less than 500 points. And then once you start getting rid of those, it's starting to get picky on your throwing and starting to finish off those results where you need to be near the center of the crosshair and on the center patch. And I've been able to have a lot more of those over the years as well. And that's been a great learning experience and very gratifying to start get closer
Mhm.
on those targets and be more consistent in those targets.
That's awesome. So I have a question related to your power line incident that you're talking about. So I was wondering, when that happened and when you have something like that where you made a mistake, how do you move on from that as a pilot and learn and grow from that? Because I know I tend to like beat myself up over things like that.
Yeah, it still lives with me today, but it was mentally challenging to continue flying because there was no damage. I slid off of a power line on a small rural road, not to undermine. To me, a power line is a power line is a power line, but to keep the focus and it affected me immediately after that. I didn't have any passengers on board. Nobody on the ground or in the basket were hurt. The balloon was not damaged. I was able to continue flying, and it, to me, it affected me in a way that I had to slow myself down. I was getting a little bit ahead of myself to where I was prepared to fly, but there's a mental checklist, if not a physical checklist, that people refer to. I let that get away from me on a flight, and now I'm much more diligent, and I have been for a long time, about that mental that check flight or that pre-flight checklist, and in making sure the way that I put things in the basket is up, so you're not looking down. You're looking more out, but your stuff is still at eye level, with being able to look out beyond your flight computer or your GPS, and you're still seeing maybe other balloons and things like that. It wasn't easy, but you've got to get back on the horse again, and you've got to make changes to keep. And I take close calls to heart, and I think there's people that don't take close calls to heart. They kind of just shove it off, blow it aside a little bit. If I had anywhere near a close call in my recent flying, I would let that affect me and make that affect what I'm going to do in the future, to make it a much less close call down the road. So I know I gave Joey some bit of information when he bought his racer. I know Joey likes his camera devices, and this is all constructive criticism. And Joe Zabata even said it. It was becoming a distraction for him in competition, worrying about setting up his camera and things like that. There can be a procedure in place to minimize the distraction. They're putting them on mounts that hang off the balloon these days, so you're not having to really deal with the GoPro in the basket. And just kind of trying to come up with a routine that minimizes the amount of time you need to play with extra devices. I know I haven't been much for carrying a lot of camera devices, and I always try to practice my routine before I take it to a competition, so I'm not trying something out for the first time at an event. And I think those are things that can help with that routine, and to keep close calls, or even too close of a call, from happening to anyone.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the way that I look at like making a mistake, or like something I could do better as a pilot, is instead of like beating myself up about it, I try to look at it as a learning opportunity. Like, no one's perfect, and you have to make mistakes sometimes to grow. So
yeah, McKenna, I couldn't agree with you more. And initially, after I had my power line contact, again, I didn't have a lot of time, but I didn't want to take full responsibility for it right off the bat. And I had to be upfront with myself. I got distracted. Initially, I wanted to blame it on this, that, or the other, but it came down to me being distracted, and I shouldn't have been distracted. I was in a high was in an intense moment at a high competition that I really wanted to force myself to partake in because it was close to home and so forth. But I accept full responsibility for it. I did what I needed to do with the FAA and remedy what happened. And I had some training flights after that, but that changed my flying forever. And I've talked about it at safety seminars back in the Midwest before. Before moving out to Albuquerque, I was on the safety seminar circuit, and I talked about it. And it's things as simple as your radio mount, your GPS mount, your computer mount, having that all taken care of before you lay your basket over, your fuel checks. I like to have that all done because sometimes you need full attention on your hot inflation, and you want to be able to go from your hot inflation to your tie off so that you can get in the air so you're not bouncing around anymore. And if you don't have those things all secured and in place, you may lose an inflation. You may have to start over again. Those are all just things that I learned, and I'm fortunate that no one was injured, and there was really no damage to speak of. But it was embarrassing at the time. I'm not gonna lie about that or try to sugarcoat that. But it was something that I think it's obvious that it made me a better pilot, and I'm not afraid to share my experiences talking about it, so that next time you guys go out and fly, or somebody else watching this will think about what they need to do to have their full attention on their inflation and full attention on their launch and what's downwind of them, and be fully attentive contour flying, and to be fully attentive coming into land, and have your eyes scanning the horizon for those power poles and not the wires themselves. So those are all things that we've been told through our training, but they need to be emphasized time and time again.
Yeah, I was not pilot, but I was passenger, and it was right in the middle when I started my training. And I was just flying along with the pilot, and we hit power lines. And I was like, I thought it was going to kill my career. Like, just even before it started, I thought it was just going to devastate me. But I think it actually really did me good. Like, I don't want to wish upon anybody. It was a terrible experience, as I'm sure you probably dealt with. But it was like, okay, so like the next week, I just went and took a week and just flew my balloon and just got confidence back in the air. I was terrified of power lines that first time. But, it just took time and time again. And now, like, I look at my flying now that I am a pilot. It's like, okay, I'm very cautious about power lines. I'm always looking ahead. I rarely use my phone. I mean, people, even my mom will bug me like, why didn't you take pictures in this flight? Like, Mom, I got bigger things to worry about than take pictures for your collection albums at home. It's like, safety first. You want to be a good pilot before, all this other stuff comes along. So yeah, I feel that one. That was 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I short-sighted myself on a launch site that I don't normally do. And that's because lots of balloons were there inflating and getting prepared for this U.S. national championship task. And so obviously that's changed the way I tie off has changed. A lot of different things have changed. And I'm an open book. If anybody ever wants to ask me a question about it, I'm there. Get your radios, your phones, get those things off the tops of the tanks, get them mounted securely, and you're going to be safer down the road because of it.
So kind of piggybacking off of, your nationals experiences, you talked about how obviously 2005, kind of proving yourself out there in a standard shaped balloon, meant a lot. So my question is, did that one mean more, or, your championship in 2013 where, 95% of the field's also flying, a racer shaped balloon? Which one, I guess, meant more to you in that sense?
I think the first one was special. The second one was probably the most gratifying because I did it in a conventional shaped balloon. And then the third one in Longview was just, it just kind of reaffirmed that I hadn't really gone anywhere. I did well at the nationals in 04 and 05. I think I won the Battle Creek Field of Flight in 06. I won the Balloon Fiesta competition in 2012, and then I won the U.S. Nationals in 13. So these things kind of come in spurts. think you've seen that with some of the top competitors. I mean, look at what Nick Donner owned Battle Creek for however many years that was. It felt like I did very well and was pretty one of the ones to beat in Anderson. There were people that couldn't wait to get away and go to a new place just because the wins in Anderson were unique in and of their own. But I think winning in Longview, proving that you can win in a different location, was gratifying as well. I think that makes for another challenge, is being able to win in different types of flying areas, different types of flying conditions. And I think that Longview has some challenging surface wind conditions. They can be kind of variable at times, coming and going from left to right. And I think that week I just put it in my head that I flew a little bit higher line and flew more over the targets, maybe a little higher. And when things changed, I answered the bell on the last flight, and we adjusted the last task accordingly, and was able to finish off that event very strong when it could have been Rhett Hartzell's. Rhett Hartzell was, I think, if he would have made a limited scoring area at the airport, which landed shy of about a foot or less, that was the difference going into the last flight. And had I not changed my fly-on task to where we did, from where we initially had it, to having a 0-0 electronic track point mark, or it might have been a 1 meter drop, that was the difference maker. So to me, I've won flying with observers in 2004 and 5. We used observers, and then to also win in Longview with logger, with using just a logger, and doing well at some of the world championships flying with different types of loggers. It's been gratifying to win without a computer, to win with a computer, to win with observers, and to win with loggers. So there's a whole kind of technological advancement that we've made with competition, and I've been able to, for the most part, handle those every step of the way, and that's been really gratifying. One of my goals is I'm not done flying yet, even though I'm going to be event director of the Nationals. I still want to win another national championship, and that's one of my goals. And trying to do so in this next decade would make for winning in 3 different decades, which I think would be pretty cool. That's kind of a goal I have. So keep my fingers crossed. I'm gonna keep plugging away. I don't plan on being an event director at the Nationals forever. I think one of your topics is going to get to this, but I still have some flying to do. I still want to represent the United States at international competitions, and I still think I can compete for a national championship too.
See, one of the things I've always appreciated about your flying, because I've been watching you, at Battle Creek events, forever, it feels like. And I always feel like you're so in control. Like, even down to, like you talked about your checklist, you're very meticulous in how you fly. It's always, repeat. It's almost like I'm sure with their basketball stuff is, okay, we work on this stuff training this day. You're very, by the book, you do everything right. And like I said, you come down to the targets, you're always in control. You're not question marking, I always appreciate that about you.
That particular that comes from my brother John. If you look at his balloons that he flies, the Nomex looks the same from its first nationals to its 10th nationals, and that's not the case with a lot of people. And I won't name any names, but it's definitely not the case with like balloons you see internationally. They're burnt, and the Nomex is brown all over the place, but Nomex is expensive. You don't want to have to replace Nomex, and it can be done. I think there's things you learn. I don't fly double burners to use double burners. I fly double burners for redundancy. I fly double burners to alternate from one burner to the other burner so that the long burn doesn't expand up in the balloon and want to start getting pushed back down towards the mouth after a really long burn. So I do a lot of alternating of single burn, of one burner burns, but I go back and forth because the racers are narrower, so you can starve the burner. If you're up at altitude, you can starve the burner a little more quickly, especially if you're coming down in a descent. And so you give that burner a break and you go to the other burner, you can still maintain full control with one burner without letting that flame get crazy, and without letting too much heat start to get wanting to get pushed back out of the envelope. So, but yeah, I get that comes from John, and repairing balloons are not necessary, and I think people need to. I look up when I burn too. I let the balloon dictate when I need to burn. I don't let the speedometer dictate when I need to burn. And because 50 pounds lighter one day, or 20 degrees cooler or warmer another day, that can all be variables on your performance of your balloon coming down. So I let the balloon dictate how I fly it, and I try not to get it too out of shape. Have I practiced that and done that? Of course I have, and I recommend everybody do that before they go to an event, versus learning that at an event, because it's not for everybody, that's for sure. But you can sure prevent it from happening with a combination of anticipating what your speed is, but also watching the balloon and keeping it under control. Because when racers cross that line, that threshold of being comfortable to being uncomfortable, it happens more quickly than it does in a conventional balloon. A conventional balloon, it might be 1,000 or 1,100 feet down. A racer, but it's not doing much more except just caving in more. You can really enter a whole nother degree of pucker factor, for lack of a better word, in a racer, because you might have 400 or 500 foot more of rate of speed involved as you're crossing that threshold. So you really want to be in control at all times. And the more you let a balloon get distorted as a racer, it's really actually slowing the balloon down. So because it's not as aerodynamic. So I like to keep the shape solid. Now there are times where, when in Rome, you've got to get down. But for the most part, I like it to be controlled, and I like to keep the panels intact, and the Nomex in the same color it was that I started the flight with.
So you talked a little bit about world championships there, and you've been quite successful representing Team USA. You've been right around the top 20, if not the top 10, I feel like, every time you go to Worlds, and you're very adamant about that on Facebook. And one other thing you're adamant about, which I really appreciated, was the qualification process for Worlds. If you were running Worlds, what would you make the qualification process?
Oh boy. I mean, you want representation from as many countries as possible. There's no doubt about that. But lately, it seems like there's been countries signing up and getting equal representation without having proven themselves. So I think everybody deserves to have a participant from a country, but I think it needs to be like typically in previous World Championship qualification. Each country gets 2 members in the first round, and that's fair. It's fair, but I think if it's a country that's signing up somebody that's never participated in a World Championship before, has no track record, maybe they don't deserve the full 2. Maybe they deserve the 1 until they can prove that they can finish in the top percentile of a World Championship before they can get the full first round. This is always up for debate in what's fair. But obviously, you want to have as many countries represented as possible, but we also want to make sure we're sending the best of the best there as well. And I know for a fact that there are countries, and it's not just the United States, that have capable pilots of winning world championships that aren't at world championships. So I don't know if there was a way to somehow limit the countries that have yet to prove themselves, but still allowing them at least the 1 participant until that country can prove themselves to finish at a percentile. Maybe it's 75%, maybe it's 50%. I don't know what that is, but should they be granted full participation, having never been at a championship before? I just think that's a question we need to ask. Are we representing an Olympic model where not all countries get to participate in an Olympics. So we just need to decide: are we wanting the best competitors, or are we wanting the most countries involved? And I think there might be a happy medium somewhere in between.
Well, and then we got the issue of people trying to pick where they live so they can qualify too, and that's
Yeah.
not right either. I mean, you can probably find somebody's address for Canada and you could qualify. I mean,
if I can't qualify in the United States, then I'm not going to go. But I enjoy the World Championship scene, and I was lucky and fortunate to qualify for the 2006 World Championship in Motegi, Japan. That was one that had a limited field, and I was very fortunate to be one of 4 Americans to qualify for that one. And that was my first one. And all 4 of us were in the top 10. I finished in 11th, just outside the top 10. Johnny won it that year. Joe Hartzell and Nick were right there fighting till the end. But that's kind of the next World Championship I qualified for after that was in Austria in 2008, and I had a good run there as well.
So wouldn't you say, because at the time when you were kind of representing the U.S., wasn't that kind of when like we were struggling to get spots for Worlds? So wouldn't you say those kind of 2 Worlds helped change the structure of how many pilots the U.S. got at Worlds? Because you looked at like Battle Creek, we had 10, 12 pilots. Granted, unfortunately, weren't able to participate, but I think it helped shape, because of the successes of you, Joe Zavada, it kind of helped shape what we are today, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, we took advantage of what we had in 2006 in Japan, and we maximized it. So our finishes that high allowed us to get, I think we had probably 8 or 10 in Austria in 2008. And then we had some solid finishes in Austria. We didn't win it that year. I finished just outside the podium in 4th, and Joseph that year finished in 6th. We also had some top 30 performances, which helped us maintain our numbers for Hungary in 2010 or 2010 in Hungary. And we did well in Hungary. And so we kind of dipped a little bit on our numbers in 2004 potentially, but the fact that the World Championship in Japan had a limited field, we still had a fair amount of participants there, and being that we finished as high as we did, we've been able to maintain our numbers since in every World Championship since. Hungary, Johnny won. He won 2 out of the 3 World Championships in that run. And then I was also qualified for Brazil in 14. And then I was qualified for Saga in 16. The one I really wanted though was the Battle Creek one. And I put a lot of pressure on myself at that 2011 Nationals, and I had a bad flight. I had a marker get out of my basket inadvertently coming in. I was coming right in on a target, and I set it down to reach for the red line to give one last red line. And I think when I released the red line, the marker went up and out of the basket, probably about 30, 40, 50 meters short of the target. And I was going to be somewhere within a few meters of that goal. And that really hurt. And I was doing pretty well that week, but that gave me a horrible score on that target. And that was one that would, if you asked Joe Zavada if he had one he wanted back, I really wanted to be on that 2012 team because it was in our backyard essentially. And I was flying well at that time. And I think I could have been finishing high like all the rest of the Americans were that year. And that's one I would wish I could have had back, was maybe the 11 Nationals. But I learned a lot, and not making the 2012 World Championship team just made me work that much harder. I qualified for 14, qualified for 16. I didn't qualify for 18. I was close, but and I'm on the outside looking in on Slovenia, but I'm hopeful. I'm wanting to make the next one, wherever that one's going to be.
So if that marker doesn't fall out of your basket, do you think you qualify for the Battle Creek Worlds? Did you ever look back and then be like, okay, if I scored where I thought I would have made the team? Was that literally the difference, kind of, sort of?
It would have made a big difference. I don't No, it would have been very, very close. I think it may have made the difference. There's also another task that week that, gosh, my mental capacity was drained after that one task, and so I really had to fight to finish off that week after that marker leaving that basket on that one task, and I think that task happened very late in the week, so I didn't have a whole lot of chance to come back from it. And I think it did make a difference. But I put a lot of extra pressure on myself that week because the Worlds were in Battle Creek, and I think I've learned that was unnecessary. And had I probably not put all that extra pressure on me, I probably would have done better. And that just goes to just my basket management and my basket organization. I probably put my marker where I never put it typically, and I definitely keep the marker tails away from the lines, because when you recoil a red line, nylon, the frizzy edge of a marker tail can stick to a frizzy red line pretty easily. So there's some more information you can take when you start competing.
Happened at my first competition, actually, in Fowlerville.
Yeah.
Did that
Oh,
really? Did it on the first target coming in.
I mean, at least he wasn't organizing them on his basket, mid-flight, Won't name that pilot, good friend of mine, but
Okay, so this is going to be your first year directing the U.S. National Championships. So can you tell us about how that came to be?
Well, we're in a very important year with the change in technology right now, and I just felt like I felt like we needed somebody that has flown with the new technology. I don't plan on this being a 5 or 10 year run to do this. I hope my goal is for this to be 1, maybe 2 years, and get the new technology kind of put in to our competition. And I've had the opportunity to direct local events here in Michigan. I put on competition flights. Then I helped call tasks at some of the smaller events. Frankenmuth, when it was getting up and going, I did some task calling in Frankenmuth. I got to call tasks at regional championship in Brookfield, Missouri. That took it to another level. I've always had an interest in doing it, but I'm not done flying yet. Each step along the way, I've learned something more, something bigger and better for more serious competitions. I was lucky to call tasks in Australia for 2 years, 2018 and 19, for a big competition down there. And we used the FAI balloon, the balloon logger down there, which we didn't have a lot of use of it in the United States, but I had some use with it down in Australia. And so the events that I've had a chance to direct have just kind of, I think, put me in a position to take this next step with the U.S. National Championship. I think it's important that we implement the new technology, but not, and then have an understanding that we don't need to overcomplicate things, at least in this initial year, because people are going to have this new technology on their plate. There's going to be a new level of learning the technology. But I think this new technology levels the playing field, because it's going to be owned on everyone's own personal device. So you'll have the ability to practice with it well before an event and get used to it, and understand how to make a declaration on the Balloon Live app, and how to make an electronic marker drop. It's going to be much more readily available to people versus the previous technology you didn't see until you arrived at an event. And so if you hadn't had a chance to practice with that at some other international event, or maybe you purchased one of the previous balloon loggers that was, I think that price tag on the FAI balloon logger was $800 or something along those lines. This new app is available for a very inexpensive price. It can be put on a phone, it can be put on a tablet. And so you have the ability to use it in training mode and practice with it. And then you also have the ability to use it in competition mode, where the director can lock down the settings and the features that need to be set to a specific level for a big competition. The officials can lock those settings down. So I think we need to get our feet wet with it this year, and then we can really take it to another level with it in the years to come.
So with that said, what kind of tasks can we really see you expect to see you calling more so at nationals? Is it going to be, you said with the transition, it's going to be kind of, getting your feet wet. But are you going to be looking kind of at an equal spread between, baggy and electronic, or a little bit more of one or the other?
I think in the United States, we definitely like more markers than we like electronic tasks. So the intent, my personal opinion will be, I like 75% marker tasks, 25% electronic tasks. Now, sometimes marker tasks, the wind changes and you don't get to throw any markers, and it kind of becomes an electronic task where you've got to make your electronic mark because you're outside of the area where they measure the markers at. But what the intent will be to try to do something in the realm of 25% electronics. At times, there might be times where that could be closer to on a particular flight, it might be closer to 2/3 or 50%. If you're doing an evening task and you want to do one marker task and one electronic task, then it's going to be 50-50. But for the most part, I think we want 2/3 to 3/4 markers at least, and then the whole playbook will be in use for the nationals. We're going to have 10 flight opportunities. We're going to have 5 morning opportunities and 5 evening opportunities to fly. So we'll be able to use the whole playbook. But there's an obvious preference to throw markers, and we intend to do that. But we also need to prepare our pilots for what they're going to see at the international level. And it would be a disservice if we didn't call some of those tasks. Now we may this year we may not call them in a fashion that they've seen at the most recent World Championship, where the order might be up to you to decide. We may call them in a more logical order so that we can have a little bit more control on when they're flown, so everybody knows who's flying what along the way, just to make the airspace a little bit more a little bit. You don't want to be flying to a task and somebody's doing a shaped task in the middle of it. There's a happy medium there about making, if everybody's kind of on the same page from task to task to task, by the end of the flight, they're going to be well spread out. And then we can maybe tack on an electronic tasks where it might require them to climb to a higher elevation, and you might have more up and down movement. But at the end of a task where they've had an opportunity to spread out over the course of a couple of hours or over the course of 3 or 4 other tasks.
So the other thing you recently directed or was a part of was the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. Now, completely different from nationals for sure. Can you talk about the challenges of doing that?
Well, a wonderful experience. I was so glad to have that opportunity to be the Balloon Fiesta event director for 3 years, 15, 16, and 17. And it's not, there's so many different aspects of ballooning that you're dealing with there. It's definitely not competition. It's not all competition. It's not all sport balloons. It's not all ride balloons. It's not all shape balloons. It's not all gas balloons. It's a combination of them all. Every aspect of our sport and of our industry is showcased at Balloon Fiesta, and it's important that we realize how important each one of those entities are. If we don't have sport balloons, our industry suffers. If we don't, there is something about each and every one of those aspects of our sport that caters to another potential pilot or another future pilot. And I think they're all equally important. And they're no more important than at an event like Balloon Fiesta, because we rely so heavily on each and every one of them for participation, that we rely heavily on them for maintaining safe flights. If one of those divisions messes up, it affects all divisions. So they're equally important, and not one of them is less important than the other. And I think sometimes some think they're more important than the other, and that's definitely not the case. I think we need to treat them all as important as the other one. And Balloon Fiesta, as much as my background was competition going to Balloon Fiesta, there was way more than competition involved with that event. Management of all different aspects of an event, crowd control and concessions and hospitality and entertainment, traffic, you name it. It was part of the role of an event director at that event, and that was a great experience. I was happy to get 3 years of that under my belt, and then I went from Balloon Fiesta and went on to flying big ride balloons for a couple years for Rainbow Riders, and that was a great experience as well.
Yeah, I was there for the only time I've been to Albuquerque is 2017. And I think Joey's same as him. It was one of the main reasons I went to pursue my license. I was like, I get towards the end of college. And I'm like, okay, I've always said after college, I want to get my pilot's license. And it was getting close to the end of college. I was a senior. And I'm like, okay, either I pursue a career in sports management where I probably will never get my pilot's license, or I try and take a more business-centric job, which I have now, and get my pilot's license. So I don't think I would be where I am today without my experience at Fiesta, because I was literally at that teetering point, like, what do I do in my life? So
yeah, there were a lot of things that the team that was in place while I was there accomplished, and a lot of subtle changes that I was very proud to be a part of, and it was a great experience. I'm going to take that experience on to directing nationals, because you got to worry about a whole wide range of experience levels at a balloon event like Balloon Fiesta, but you also have to worry about and be concerned with the experience levels at a nationals. So you can't just focus on the most competitive pilots of an event. You've got to be focused on all of the pilots that are at a specific event, and no event like Balloon Fiesta magnifies that type of way you need to manage an event and lead an event. Is there's so many different skill levels there, and you got to make sure you're taking all skill levels into your decision making.
Well, then you have issues you don't expect to deal with, like a Mexican dollar.
Yeah, that was while I was directing, and
I was there for it. I was helping Gordo on Crown Line. I remember it. Yeah,
that balloon took off. It didn't mean to take off, but the rope did not break, by the way.
Right.
I was able to get my hands on the rope afterwards. It did not break. I think it may have been a situation where maybe they were releasing it to lay it over, or it got inadvertently released too soon, but the rope did not break. It was not in the same condition it was, but it did not break. And then it went and landed in the fireworks area.
Yeah.
And that but he got down safely, and all was well that ends well. And, it was a chance for everyone to reevaluate the way they tie off, not only for flights, but for tethers and glows, and having a backup line as well. And never tying off to quick releases when you're wanting to just stay on the ground. So those are all important things to keep in mind when you're wanting to stay on the ground. Tie off in that manner.
Yeah, and major props to the pilot, of course. I mean, he handled it well for the situation it was. So, I mean, pilot did well. It does make for a good joke later, but it was a scary situation.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was right next to it when it happened. It was so ominous to see that balloon like in the dark.
As event director, I was on the opposite end of the field. I was about to have a bite to eat because everything was winding down. What I was about to eat quickly went into the garbage can, and that whole thing that consumed me for the next few hours. So that was
oh my goodness.
he did handle it very well, and he got down safely. And but we all learned a great lesson from that situation.
Yeah. So the next topic and the last topic we wanted to talk to you about is your flight over the Sandias in Albuquerque. Do you want to tell us about your flight over the mountains there?
Well, I've had a few flights over the Sandia Mountains, but prior to that, I've also had a few flights over the Continental Divide. I took part of an event in Breckenridge, Colorado, for a few years in the early 90s, actually it was mid 90s roughly, and I got to fly from Breckenridge, Colorado, over the Continental Divide into a wide open valley near South Park. Hartzell is a little town. Fairplay's a little town on the other side there. But I did that flight 3 times. That's almost the area where the balloons that recently took off and flew across the Pikes Peak kind of started, from near that valley where we landed from the flights we did from Breckenridge. So those were really cool flights, and we needed oxygen on those flights because you can get up over definitely over 12.5 for an extended period of time. Flying the Sandia Mountains in Albuquerque is nice because you don't have to have oxygen on board. You can do that flight at a much lower altitude. I've done that flight 3 times. I did it by myself a couple of times from a couple of different angles. I did it from Balloon Fiesta Park and landed out towards almost to Moriarty, but not quite. And I also did it from south down towards Tomei, which is an area down towards it's a little about 30 minutes south of Albuquerque, and did it at another angle going back to the northeast, and I landed near Moriarty. So I've done it from a couple of different angles. And one of the flights I did with my brother and Erica, but we were in my brother's glass bottom basket at the time.
Whoa,
so we were flying over the mountains, looking down at the radio towers,
wow,
and looking down at Sandia Mountain through the clear basket as we flew over. That was pretty cool.
How cool.
Yeah. It's those flights, you don't want too fast of winds, but you want a steady flow for a smooth ride, but you don't want too fast of winds. Like Albuquerque is fortunate to have a weather reporting station out at the Double Eagle Airport that's a rate. It gives you up to second radar winds, up to tens of thousands of feet above the ground. And so that's a unique thing that Albuquerque has. You can monitor winds aloft very accurately when that thing's up and running. You can, and then during Balloon Fiesta, that device would get taken to the Balloon Fiesta Park, and those winds would be available to the pilots from on site at the park. But for those types of flights around Albuquerque, generating even the mountain flights, those winds aloft, accurate winds aloft forecast combined with accurate winds aloft readings from that weather station were very, very instrumental in those flights.
Cool.
Very
All
cool.
right, so the last thing we got for you, as we know you've been, watching us weekly, we've been doing at the end of our show a fan questions segment. So we're just gonna kind of rapid fire these at you.
Okay.
So the first one, this is one we get asked every week by the same person. Pilot.
Black Panther.
You got it. You got it. Nice. Yes, it was. What is your favorite Marvel movie? We're starting to tally them now, so we'll put one down for Black Panther for sure.
All right. I had to do my homework on that though.
Oh yeah, same. I was thinking about that today.
You had to think about it.
I don't even know what I would answer that. So the next question we got for you is somebody had asked which member of the Petrehn family do you feel is the best competitor?
Oh, geez. As much as I'd like to say myself, it's hands down the 2-time world champion, and what does he have now? Does he have 4 national championships? BFA
I think 5.
Yeah,
I'd have to look, but yeah.
There's no doubt. It's John. There's no doubt. My brother Maury's pretty good. My brother Andrew, he he doesn't stay in it long enough to get the results that he's capable of getting. But I would say there's no doubt about it. It's John.
The next question comes from Brock Bame. So he asked, is there a year that you directed Fiesta that was your particular favorite, and why?
Oh, wow. I think any balloon fiesta where you can have a safe event is a good event. And I think for the most part, each event that I directed, we weren't perfect by any means. We made some mistakes, but we did our best to try to improve upon those mistakes the next year, or even mid-event if we needed to. The first one was probably special because I got in it at a late start. I didn't get there until June, and so a lot of it was set in motion. But by the latter one, had a chance to do a lot with the special shapes that I felt very cool. It was really cool to position some of the special shapes next to each other and in certain combinations to make for some good photo opportunities and crowd pleasing moments. So that was kind of cool to do towards the latter end of the event or into my time frame there. But the first one was special just because of how new it was, and it's such an undertaking though. But the first one will always be the most special one for me.
Gotcha. So the next one we have, what is the highest altitude that you've flown to?
Yeah, that would have to go back to one of the Continental Divide flights. I think we got up into the high 17,000 foot range. We had oxygen on board. I was flying with my brother John, and we were cruising along at almost about 60 miles an hour as well. A little faster than you really want for that flight. We encountered some turbulence coming down on the backside, but we ended up waiting it out and only having about a 20 mile an hour landing instead of a 30 plus mile an hour landing. So we had the space to do it.
Our next one comes from Jenny Kerber. She asks, so what was your biggest takeaway from working with multiple manufacturers?
Whoa, working with manufacturers, you get to see what goes in the behind the scenes testing, because they've got everything goes through FAA inspection, FAA safety margins. You've got just the types of testing for thread, for load tape, for fabric, for you name it. Just the amount of cyclical testing, of strength testing, of porosity testing, just the amount of oversight that a certified manufacturer has to go through is not, a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of testing that goes into anything and everything they produce that gives it a standard airworthiness for them to be able to replicate that same product time and time again with little delay down the road. But that's a lot of people don't understand it. You can't, it's not as easy as just making a 67,500 cubic foot balloon. There's a whole process involved in certifying an in-between size or a different model. There's a lot of paperwork involved and a lot of behind the scenes testing involved that I think goes unnoticed sometimes.
Our next one. So somebody wanted to ask you, what's your biggest concern when it comes to like calling tasks?
My biggest concern is probably making sure getting them too congested, getting the balloons too much, even though it's fun to sometimes be rubbing and racing. From a director standpoint, there's things that can be done to spread the balloons out a little bit more and give them the opportunity to pick a little bit more of their wind line versus the director's wind line. And so my biggest fear is is congestion, and obviously trying to make sure we avoid congestion to avoid any potential collisions. That's my biggest concern as a director. In Scottsbluff, Nebraska, there's a lot of open spaces out there. We can get balloons down safely in some wide open spaces if it does get a little bit breezy. But I think congestion from an event director standpoint is my biggest concern, because I don't want baskets colliding into envelopes.
Gotcha. Our next one comes from Brock Bame as well. So do you have a particular event in the country that was like your favorite to fly, or is your favorite to fly?
There was always something special about the event in Motegi, Japan. It's no longer happening. I was lucky to fly there a couple years before the Worlds in 2006. I also went there and crewed a couple more times. But there's something about that event. It took place at the Motegi Twin Ring racetrack area, which is an international oval, and they also have some road courses there. But the hills and the fall foliage that was always present during the time frame that we flew there, and the river valley, then getting up high enough to potentially even see downtown Tokyo or Mount Fuji, even though it was still a long ways away, or the sea or the ocean. That was always a pretty special place to fly. But also, I have to throw in Dubai. I was able to do the World Air Games in Dubai, and I was able to fly. Erica flew with me off of the World Islands on the last flight, and that was an incredible flight. And we came back and landed at the closing ceremonies location at the Skydive Dubai drop zone at the Palm Islands there. That was probably the most spectacular flight I've ever done. And each flight just kept getting better. But Motegi, Japan will always have a special place in my heart for having attended that event for a few times.
Cool.
So the next one we have. So looking back at Team Nationals, I know you saw our conversations with both Cameron and Joe about this. Do you feel it was fair that, you, John, and Maury were all able to be on the same team? I mean, if there's a definition for super team in ballooning, that is definitely it.
We did that once. I don't think there'll ever be a rule to allow it to happen again. Maybe within the family, or maybe written in the rule book somewhere. But I don't think you should have 3 A players on a team. Unfortunately, there's only 10 teams at this upcoming Team Nationals. There's a lot of great pilots that didn't have the opportunity to submit a team. And I understand that. I think in the future, I hope that we can, if it's limited on teams and we're going to call it a national championship, it's a fine line between calling it a national championship and calling it a team championship. If you start to blend 2 NUA pilots into an element that's called a national championship, I think we walk a very fine line doing that. But it's also going to be kind of cool for the C players that have never participated in that kind of format before. But I feel bad that there's so many quality, maybe even some A players and a lot of quality B players that just didn't get an opportunity to sign up. And I hope we can address that in the future. Obviously, the teams is a great way to get people working together that have never worked together before, and it's also a great way to get anyone like any of you 3 involved on a team champion or a team competition. Like the Canton, Ohio balloon event is a great way to get somebody involved that is taking their first steps into competition. And so I think there's a future for team championship events. But I hope we can continue to make sure we don't leave some quality people, some quality competitors out in future team national championship events. That's kind of my only take on that. But I'm glad to see it back, and I'm looking forward to participating with Jason Jones, who's a great pilot and a good friend of mine, and Larry Cohen is going to be on my team as well. And Larry's improved as much as any competitor in the last handful of years that I know of. And he's a C player technically, but I know he's definitely flowing better than a C definition in a lot of events lately. So we're going to go have fun, that's for sure. And we're going to be flying amongst each of us. We'll get along with one another, and we'll be able to communicate well together, because we'll definitely be enjoying each other's company during that event, and we're going to have some fun. That's all it's about.
Absolutely. So our last one, it's actually one from us three. This is similar to Blake's, Marvel movie series. We're going to start kind of asking every guest we have.
Yeah.
So, similar to the NBA or the MLB, players get their own walk-up song. If you were to get one in ballooning, what do you feel it would be?
Oh my gosh. All I do is win, 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 no matter what.
You absolutely will love to see it.
How about that one? Does that work?
That works. We'll tally you down for
one.
it. All right, that's all the time we have for you this week on BurnerCast. Next week, we got second-generation pilot Jenny Kerber joining us as our special guest. Really excited to have her. Again, thanks for coming on the show tonight, Paul, and we'll see you next time on BurnerCast.